I packed my husband's entire belongings into his truck, drove it to his office, and handed the keys to my best friend while she was sitting at her desk. We had been married for 4 years. We moved halfway across the country away from our families, purely to support his new corporate career, settling into a tiny, unfamiliar town. Because teaching jobs were scarce, I gave up my classroom license and took a temporary desk job at a local logistics company that operated 7 days a week. It was a brutal, lonely adjustment, but I did it willingly because I loved him. Soon, I became close friends with a coworker named Sarah, who was also new to the area. Our husbands connected instantly, and the four of us spent every single weekend together sharing backyard barbecues and splitting the bills down to the penny. When Sarah got pregnant with her first child, I caught the baby bug, and my husband and I agreed it was time to start our own family. But for 5 months, the pregnancy tests kept coming back negative. I fell into a deep depression, feeling like an absolute failure as a woman. When I finally saw a positive test, the joy lasted exactly 2 weeks before I suffered a devastating miscarriage. Throughout that entire dark period, Sarah was my absolute rock. I sat on her living room couch for hours, crying into my coffee, pouring my heart out, and sharing deeply personal marriage details that I hadn't even told my own mother. But 3 weeks ago, the entire illusion shattered. An older, blunt coworker texted me out of the blue, saying she had just spotted my husband's truck parked in the dark corner of a local hotel lot, with Sarah sitting in the passenger seat. When I confronted him that night, he laughed it off, rolling his eyes and telling me my coworker was just hallucinating. I wanted so badly to believe him, but my gut knew the truth. I quietly pulled away from Sarah at the office. A real friend would have asked why I was suddenly acting so cold, but she stayed completely silent, never looking me in the eye. That was my final clue. The real nightmare unfolded last week when my husband announced he was leaving for a 3-day mountain training trip. The exact same afternoon, I checked the company schedule and saw Sarah had requested PTO for those exact 3 days. My chest felt tight. That night, while he was fast asleep, I sat in the dark for 40 minutes guessing his phone passcode until the screen finally clicked open. I scrolled through their text thread and watched my entire world burst into flames. They weren't just planning a mountain cabin trip. They had been sleeping together multiple times a week during lunch breaks for 6 straight months. He was even going over to her house on his days off, sleeping with her while her newborn baby was crying in the next room. When I launched into him the next morning, showing him the screenshots, he broke down crying. He didn't even try to deny it. He just sobbed on the kitchen floor, making pathetic excuses. He told me it was just physical, claiming I had turned sex into a boring chore while trying to get a baby, and that Sarah's husband hadn't been interested in her since she got pregnant. The sheer disgust made me physically sick. While I was actively losing my baby and trusting her with my deepest trauma, she was actively sleeping with my husband. I didn't shed a single tear in front of him. The intense grief instantly hardened into pure, quiet focus. I spent the next 2 days systematically unlinking our lives. I went to the bank, removed his name from our joint checking account. Then I went to work and told every single person in our department exactly what they had done. I didn't care about being professional anymore. When the human resources manager called me into her office to ask about the workplace drama, she looked at the proof, her expression softening into pure, quiet respect. She gave me a slow, supportive nod and quietly agreed to look the other way while I handled my business. Yesterday morning, while my husband was at work begging me for a second chance via text, I changed the locks on our house. I packed every stitch of his clothing, his golf clubs, and his electronics into boxes, threw them in his truck, and drove it straight to our office parking lot. I walked into the building, holding his spare keys. I found Sarah sitting in the corner break room, holding a paper cup of tea. The entire room went dead silent the moment I stepped inside. She looked up at me, her hands instantly starting to shake as she saw the sheer look on my face. She looked for a place to run, but she was trapped against the counter. My husband was standing just a few feet away near the water cooler, his face turning completely pale as he realized what was happening. I didn't say a single word to either of them. I walked right past my husband, ignoring his pleading eyes completely. I stopped directly in front of Sarah, reached out, and dropped his truck keys heavily into her trembling hand. I looked at both of them one last time with absolute icy silence, turned on my heel, and walked out to enjoy my own hard-earned peace.